What a morning. Most of you don't know this, but I woke up Thursday morning, Thanksgiving morning, with a lovely gift, courtesy of one of my sons. We're not naming names. But this particular gift isn't one I've given thanks for because it's a lovely cold. It's a virus of some sort. The home tests, they tell me what it isn't. Okay, but not what it is. The home tests say that it's not COVID and it's not the flus. So I have named it a cootie, and I am doing my best to tolerate its presence. And it seems that Mona and a few other folks have cooties too. So know with me in this moment that their bodies are a reflection of perfection, wonderfully healthy in every way, and that is something to be truly grateful for. My friend Soria says, these colds, these cooties, are the universe's way of making sure that my body and mind get some rest. That is something I rarely take the time to do, as those of you who are around me a lot know. Soria is really, really insightful when it comes to finding those parallels between life's unpredictable moments of discomfort and the gifts from spirit which lie within them. Although this one doesn't yet feel too much like a gift. Now, with that in mind, I will tell you now that Paul Savoy, our soon-to-be minister, normally would be preparing communion in my stead, and I got a text from him this morning that he too has an entirely different cootie, so he is out. So we are going to move communion to the second Sunday in December, okay? Because next Sunday is what? Who knows what it is? Pancakes. Pancake breakfast. If you want them, show up at 10. It is totally free. Come and join us. And at that deferred communion, you will be offered Jesus. Those are those commercially made communion wafers, instead of my unleavened bread recipe, which I'm still kind of tweaking in hopes that it'll become a bit more tasty and easier to swallow. Has anyone encountered that problem? You put that in your mouth, it doesn't want to go down. Or, maybe we'll just pass out bigger cups of that wonderful communion wine that we have. It's made from the freshest grapes, and it's ready to pour without that pesky aging process that makes us walk and talk funny if we drink too much. And that gives me something about this cootie to be grateful for, and that is my darling husband, Mike, who has stepped into the shoes that were emptied. He's being brave and loving and very, very supportive, and I thank you. Now, speaking of gratitude, do you remember that golden wheel in the narthex? You couldn't have missed it. It's like right in the aisle. All throughout November, many of you have faithfully been filling that wheel with your little slips of gratitude. Okay? Simple little pieces of paper holding powerful spiritual energy. And in doing so, you have quietly been building the foundation upon which miracles are made. You've been aligning your consciousness with thanksgiving, and gratitude is one of the most potent creative forces in the universe. And it is time to move into the next phase of the exercise, which, beginning next Sunday at our pancake breakfast, help me remember to move it over there, please, somebody. Next week, it will be officially renamed our Golden Circle as we enter a new 5-week series, the Sacred Circle, because we're exploring sacred symbols. Now, for the rest of this month, I invite you to do 2 things. First, write down every gift you receive, big or small, expected or surprising, and also write down every gift you give. Acts of kindness count, time counts, compassion counts, because sometimes the smallest gestures ripple out the farthest. Why are we doing this? It isn't just because I spent all that time wrapping the wheel. There is a good purpose. It's because this is how we train our consciousness to stay open, receptive, generous, aligned with flow. This is how we usher in greater abundance, greater health, greater joy, greater prosperity, and a deeper awareness of divine movement in our lives. Again, we're studying sacred symbols, but we're also creating one. A living, evolving symbol of the sacred process of giving and receiving, because doing this tells God that you're both willing to do the work and ready to receive. So as this wheel back there becomes a circle, your circle, you're going to begin to see upon it physical evidence of the presence of miracles in your life and in the lives of others in our church family. So stay with me in this, okay? Participate. Bring your heart into it, because the more you engage, the more powerful the revelation will be. Now to the business at hand. So today we arrive at two thresholds at once. The first is the end of our 5-week series on our first sacred symbol, which is the wheel. It's wisdom, its cycles, its motions, and its mysteries. And the second is the beginning of Advent. And that kind of feels perfect, right? An ending and a beginning. The end of one turning and the beginning of another. The wheel keeps moving, and so do we. Advent in the Christian tradition is a time when we prepare for the birth of Jesus, the fulfillment of ancient prophecy, the arrival of the one upon whom the Spirit would rest, the holy child foretold by Isaiah in today's first inspirational reading, which Mike shared a few minutes ago. And we honor that deeply today. But Advent is also something more. Something inward, something intimate, something each of us experiences in the quiet truth of our own soul. Advent is the season when the wheel of consciousness turns toward light, not because God suddenly shows up, but because we turn toward the presence already within us. That is the message behind Isaiah's prophecy. Isaiah tells of a shoot rising from the stump of Jesse, upon whom the Spirit would rest, one of wisdom, counsel, peace. And then comes the mystical line, and a little child shall lead them. For centuries after the early people first foretold of this Messiah, people looked outward toward holy kings, holy warriors, holy rulers, asking, who's the child who leads? Where? And then Jesus was born, stepping into and answering that question. But it sometimes appears to me that a lot of folks ignore what Jesus actually taught. And we will get into that in a moment, because contrary to what many have said, it is clear to me when I read these passages that Isaiah was not simply prophesying a single person. He was describing a state of consciousness. He says, and he shall not judge after that which his eyes see, neither reprove after that which his ears hear. That is the absence of judgment and trust that it's all good unfolding. With justice shall he judge the poor and reprove with uprightness for the meek of the earth. That's the care of others. When we recognize all of humanity as precious parts of one whole, and he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth. That is when we rejoice and celebrate the world around us instead of destroying it. And with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. Hear this. Because there are no wicked when one declares that only love is the catalyst behind all. The wolf and the lamb lying down together, that is the reconciliation of warring parts within us. The leopard with the kid, the lion with the ox, that is the dissolving of inner conflict, which thereby dissolves outer discord. And a little child shall lead them. That is the return to innocence, the return to unconditioned perception, the return to the Christ within. And yes, Christians largely see Jesus as the fulfillment of that prophecy, the child upon whom the Spirit rested in fullness. And we honor that. We celebrate that. We stand on that foundation. And then we keep reading. Because Isaiah was speaking of a pattern, and Jesus revealed that pattern in human form so we could recognize it within ourselves. In the Christian tradition, Jesus is called the Christ, not because Christ was his last name, nor was H his middle initial as far as I know, but because in the ancient languages, Christ means anointed. Anointed with holy purpose, anointed with spirit, anointed with divine light. Jesus embodied the Christ so completely that people could finally understand what the prophets meant. He's the prototype of divine humanity, the pattern revealed, the wheel of consciousness turning in perfect alignment. But the thing is, he didn't just tell us who he was. He showed us and told us over and over again, both in beautiful parables and quite directly, who we are. He said, "You are the light of the world. The kingdom of God is within you. What I do, you shall do also, and greater than this. The little children come to me. Unless you become like one of these children, you cannot enter the kingdom." Jesus did not come to be admired. He came to be followed. Not worshipped from afar, but emulated from within. And this is where Paul picks up the thread. Our second reading is from Paul's letter to the Corinthians, the first. It's a passage that is so often misunderstood that the real meaning has been hiding in plain sight. And I will tell you that I fed this into a couple of different AI sources just to see if somebody out there is reading it and thinking, and AI got it wrong. Scouring the whole internet, it said what everyone else says. And then I kind of spelled it out and said, I think this is literal. And it went, that makes sense. So, hear this, okay? It says, "For now we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect has come, then that which is imperfect shall come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a mirror, darkly. But then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I am known. And now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love." Now let's look at that whole passage a little more closely. And here I want you to suspend what you have been told it means, what you think it means based on the way that you've been taught to hear it. Paul says, for now we know in part. Why? Because right now, as responsible adults, we slice the world into categories. We divide it into good and bad, right and wrong, us and them. We know in part because we see in parts. Then Paul says, when that which is perfect has come, that which is imperfect shall pass away. What is this, that which is perfect? It's not morality, it's not behavior, it's not flawless performance. It is the return to wholeness, the end of judgment, the dissolving of ego's categories, the childlike perception that Jesus spoke of. Because when we stop categorizing and deciding what passes and what fails, we can take a step back and see that even amidst apparent chaos, a balance is being struck. And we realize, therefore, that all is perfect, even when appearances seem otherwise. Paul goes on, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. Here is where nearly every minister, preacher, and scholar appears to get it wrong because they're reading it with an adult eye, still thinking it's metaphoric. Yet throughout his letter, Paul was being quite literal. And the translation depends on two things. First, whether the translator is reading from a place of ego, and second, which syllable or word you put the emphasis on. Okay? Paul is not condemning childhood, he's grieving the loss of it. When I became a man, I put away childish things. He put away wonder. He put away trust that he'd be safe and taken care of. He put away simple faith. He put away perceiving life as whole, unbroken, inherently good. He learned to judge, to fear. He learned to categorize. He learned to see through the lens of ego, of right and wrong and good and bad, abundance or scarcity. And then he says, for now we see through a mirror darkly. The ancient mirrors were polished metal or stone, obsidian. They were blurry and distorted and dim. Paul is saying, as adults, we see life through the smudges of our own fears. As adults, we mimic and mirror each other, trying to be what we're told we should be. We act the way others appear to, hiding our true selves in the darkness beneath the veil of conformity. And here's where it gets really clear. After he says that, now we're busy mirroring each other, pretending to be something we're not. Paul says, but then, face to face, then as a child, and when we return to innocence, then as a child, and when the Christ awakens within us, then when the wheel turns back to center, then we shall know ourselves as God already knows us. And then comes the crown of Paul's passage here. Faith, hope, love. And the greatest of these is love. Love is the force that keeps that wheel moving. It is the magnetism between God and the soul. Love is that Christ within us. Love is that child who leads. Our final reading comes from Ernest Holmes, where in an impassioned lecture given at one of his favorite places in Asilomar, he names the inner light with many titles: Atman, Apollo, Ein Sof, Christ, different traditions, one presence. Holmes says the eternal is forever begetting its only begotten, and is begetting him in me now. Not then, not back in Bethlehem, not only, Not only in ancient history, but in me now, he said. In you now. In all humanity without exclusion, whether or not you choose to see it. Everywhere now. Jesus revealed the Christ in himself so we might awaken to the Christ in ourselves. And he said it over and over again, though few are bold enough to proclaim it. This is Advent, the birth of the inner light. And now the wheel. For 5 weeks, we have explored this symbol, the center of stillness, the spokes of belief, that rim of experience, the motion of consciousness. What we haven't talked about until now is the cycle of the wheel. Life turns, seasons turn, identity turns, faith turns, grief turns, healing turns, understanding turns. We descend, we rise, we learn, we maybe break a little, but we become. And in that turning, we are not punished, we are transformed. The wheel is the great teacher, which is why I brought you all something today. The first gift that you get to write down and place in our golden wheel in the back. I expect to see pens happening back there. Okay, this is what I've got. Does anyone remember these things? You have to be a certain age to remember. Remember this? Anyone have one as kids? Okay, some of you wanted one. Maybe some of you still do. Okay, this little toy is the perfect metaphor for Advent. Watch it. It dips, but that dip becomes the energy for its rise. It wobbles, but the motion stabilizes it. It falls. It does, I swear it does. There it goes. Only to catch the rail and fly upward again. It looks like it might shoot off. Can you really get it going? It really does. Let me get it going. Okay, it looks like it might just, why? You're not illustrating my point. Help me out here, okay? It clings to the track. It continues to defy gravity. It is playful, and it's joyful, and it's simple, and it's wonder-filled, and it teaches more theology than most textbooks. Because the Christ child within you works exactly the same way. When you think you are falling, you are gathering momentum. When life dips, you are preparing to soar. When things wobble, you're finding your balance. And when you trust the rail, that divine track beneath you, you cannot fall. In a moment, Eddie's going to sing an amazing song as these wheels are passed out to you, not as toys, but as sacraments of wonder, as reminders that the child within you still leads. So today, on the first Sunday of Advent, we honor the prophecy of Isaiah, the birth of Jesus the Christ, the teaching of Paul, the wisdom of Holmes, the lessons of the wheel, and the joy of a simple spinning toy. All of them tell the same story. Advent is not only something that happened once, it's something that happens whenever you awaken. Whenever one lets go of judgment, they become like a child again. Whenever one chooses love over fear, the Christ is born within. Whenever one trusts the turning of the wheel, they rise. Whenever they return to their center, they begin to see face to face. Whenever you remember your innocence, the kingdom opens. Advent is not just a countdown to a baby in a manger. It is the birth of the Christ light in your own consciousness. It is the return of wonder, the restoration of innocence, the resurrection of joy, and the rebirth of love. Advent is upon us because you have arrived at the threshold of remembering who you truly are. And when you remember who you are, nothing can keep you down. Now, Eddie, can you give them the gift of your voice, please?